Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back. We're back to work today on this ES335 kit, and in today's video, we're going to show you how to do a burst with lacquer. So before we get started, we're going to chat for just a minute about burst finishes. This one, we're not doing spray cans. We're using a gun. This is a little DeVilbiss starting line gun, inexpensive unit. You guys have seen the guns that I use. If you're looking for any of them, there's the Warwick link in the description for some of my favorite guns that I use, but also these inexpensive ones are available in the Amazon link in the description. Those are all affiliate links, so if you use any of them, it helps me out. I appreciate it. You can also get a respirator through there if you want. Today's video, we're going to be using the gun and 3 different colors. So we're going to do a tritone burst, tobacco brown, red mahogany, and vintage amber. These are all from Oxford Supply. You guys have seen these before too, ready to spray right out of the can. And they come in spray cans as well. So I'll put a link to Oxford in there as well. But now Solo Music Gear also carries it. So you can get Oxford through that link if you want. That one's also an affiliate link. Oxford, I believe, is now shipping to the States. So that problem is finally solved. You may have to actually contact the owner, but they should be able to arrange that for you. I'm going to get this guitar sanded and get right into spraying pretty much, and we'll do most of this via voiceover. But one thing that I do want to cover beforehand is, personally, I do bursts differently depending on whether I'm doing them in transparent or opaque. So if I'm doing an opaque burst, like a silver with a black burst on it or anything like that, I'm going to start with my base color and then I paint in the burst afterward. And in some cases, I'll still do that with a transparent, but typically with a transparent, I do the opposite. I start with the outside and then I put my other color on top. And what I actually do is I don't just restrict myself with something like this where I'm going from dark to light. And not like a blue and a green, I mean like a brown, red, and then amber. I will start with the dark color around the edge, and then I will put the other color, the next one, over top of the dark and fade it in more, and then I'll put my last one over top of everything, that kind of thing. That tends to create a more gradual gradient, a more gradual blend, so that, you know, that might be what you want. It might not be, I don't know. All a matter of preference, of course, but that's what I'm going to be doing today. I'm going to start on the outside with the tobacco brown and a tight fan pattern, so no fan at all actually, more like a spray can pattern, and then I'll broaden it out a little bit probably to go with the mahogany, and then I'll fire up the fan pattern and give the whole thing a coat of the amber. We're going to go brown on the outside edges as well, and I think probably up the back of the neck, although we might do a burst on the headstock just for the heck of it. So with that all said, I'm going to fire up the compressor. You guys won't be able to hear me properly, but we'll move into voiceover, get this guy sanded, and get to work on this burst. It is very warm in here. Whew. All right, let's get after it. We won't spend a lot of time here on the sanding aspect of this. We did most of it last episode. I just wanted to cover it briefly, mostly because I realized that not everybody will have watched that, since this is a specific tutorial on bursts. So you can do this by hand. You can do it with an orbital sander if you're very comfortable with an orbital sander, if you've spent a lot of time using one. I'm using a round, slightly flexible sanding pad, as you'll see there, and it's a 5-inch radius, and I like that for this type of carved body because it gives me the opportunity to use the radius to work into the kind of carves here. But you can easily do that with your palm, so don't worry if you don't have access to an appropriate sanding block, a flexible sanding block or something like that. That's fine. Use your palm. Try not to use your fingers a whole bunch. You can leave ridges. You need to be very careful about sanding with your fingers, and it depends on which direction you're going, but that is a risk that you run. So I'm sanding sealer here. I've already put on several coats of the Oxford sanding sealer. I did those just out of a can. If you didn't see that, feel free to check out the prior episode, which is part 2 of my ES335 kit build series that I'm working on right now. This is technically part 3, but of course, as I said, titled differently. We'll speed up the footage here because I'm sure you guys don't want to watch me sand a whole bunch, but a couple quick comments to note. One, I know some people think that you need to sand with the grain of the wood at all times. This guitar has been sealed, like I said, 3 coats of sealer, so there is no grain of the wood anymore. There is no specific direction that you need to sand. Now, sanding all in one direction does have its merits, and so I'll give you that. If that's something that you think is important, fair enough. I do not think at this stage in a paint job that it's important. I don't think when you're sanding sealer that you need to go that route. So on the back here, I don't have any of the F-holes or pickup cavities to deal with. So I'm going to make the switch here to working with an orbital sander. Again, this one has a 5-inch radius because I changed out the block on it from the 6-inch one that it comes with so that I could do this sanding job the way that I wanted. Once again, nothing wrong with doing it by hand or doing it using a block. This is just a little quicker, and I've spent enough time working with an orbital that I'm comfortable doing this. If you're looking for a Dynabrade orbital sander, that's what this is. Once again, Amazon link in the description has them. Feel free to grab it through there. It helps me out if you do. I'm not going to spend a bunch of time here covering the rest of the sanding on this thing. Once again, if you're looking for that, it's the same as the prior video where I sanded the single layer of poly sealer that comes on a guitar kit like this. This is the ES335 guitar kit from Solo Music Gear. It's beautiful. I'm a big fan, and I can't wait to get it done. If you're looking for this one, it's available through my Solo Music Gear link in the description, or you can find it at sologuitars.com. So, next up, we're going to get this guy cleaned off real quick. I'm going to use some wax and grease remover to do that. We're going to tape off the binding so that I don't have to do so much scraping work at the end, and I will have a scraping tutorial. I shouldn't call it a tutorial. I'm going to have a trick for you guys. So I'll do the scraping in this series, but I'm also going to have a separate standalone video where I show you a trick for scraping bindings that makes it a lot safer, quicker, and easier. I think you guys are going to like this one. It's a good one. Like I said, I'm giving this a wipe with wax and grease remover. In particular, I'm using Duplicolor wax and grease remover. I don't think that matters at all, but that's what I happen to be using in this case. I get a lot of questions about this actually, and some of them are quite funny. It's, what do you use to wipe this down? Well, I use wax and grease remover. What should I use if I don't have wax and grease remover? Well, I mean, you should still use wax and grease remover. Just go get some. My recommendation isn't contingent on what you have in your inventory, but regardless, I mean, you can also use Windex. It's not as good. It can leave residue, can be a problem, but it's usually okay. And depending on the paint you're using, you can also use like lighter fluid, something like that. So for finicky tape jobs like this, if I can call it that, this orange fine line tape is wonderful. It's very thin, it's strong, it flexes reasonably well. It's not as bendy, as flexible sideways as the blue fine line tape. Not even close, in fact. That stuff is pretty much rubber, and this is like a rubberized paper. So this is what I would use for any kind of binding work, but you wouldn't catch me like mapping out vintage flames with it or something like that. Anyway, this 1/4-inch tape is what I'm using. It flexes around these corners really well. And the way that I do this is I'm just kind of careful, I guess. I take it slow, I'm patient with it, and I stretch out a section of tape all at once, and then I kind of press it down. I aim my right hand here toward where I want to go, and I press it down with my left hand as I go. And I'm only masking the side here, so the front and back will also have obviously a little bit of binding, the width of the binding, but it's very thin. So I just mask the side, and then afterward I'll scrape the front and the back, but I won't have to scrape the side, or if I do, it will be very little. Usually if you're going to have a problem here, it's going to be on these inner curves like where I'm taping right now. And then as you work your way out here to the outside, the tape sticks fine, and you shouldn't really have much in the way of issues around there. Occasionally a little bit of paint will get underneath, and then you just get rid of it with a razor blade. But those inner corners sometimes will have difficulties. So this is a pretty straightforward tape job. For some reason, people seem to like tape peel videos, so I'm sure I'll toss one of those onto my Instagram after this when this comes off. And for now, I don't think you need to really watch me do a whole heck of a lot more taping, so I'll go ahead and fast forward this or skip, and we'll move on to the painting. So much like with the sealer, I'm hanging this from something in the ceiling, and I'm taking it down to paint it, and then I hang it back up to dry between coats. Nitrocellulose lacquer dries insanely quickly, so that does make this a lot easier. What I'm doing here is I'm starting off with the sides, the edges, and I'm spraying my tobacco brown lacquer on there. This would be an appropriate place to have a little bit of a fan pattern going. I've got mine adjusted pretty much all the way down though, and I'm just kind of being gentle about it, but you see me there adjust it back up a touch with my thumb. You can't do a significant fan pattern adjustment like this without changing your air pressure. So you can do a really minor one, which is what I've done here, just a touch of fan pattern to be able to get around these edges better without having to do a bunch of passes. But if you do much more than that, it's going to substantially lower your air pressure, and you're going to have to adjust your regulator as well. So keep that in mind. And yeah, I'm getting kind of all of my tobacco brown work done here. I start with the edges. They're pretty straightforward. I'm trying not to touch any of it. I've got a glove on my right hand. You could put a glove on each hand. I don't like to spray with one, so I've got a glove on my right hand only because that's the one that I'm touching the guitar with, and I obviously don't want to get grease from my hands all over the guitar. I've already cleaned it with wax and grease remover, so that would be counterproductive. So I'm getting that part done, and then I will adjust this fan pattern back down and do my edge work on the two faces of the guitar. Now, for the purpose of this video, I'm going to try and keep as much of the painting footage as possible at regular speed. In fact, I assume I'll do it all at regular speed, but as I do this voiceover, I'm kind of editing as I go so I can make sure you guys see what you need to and that the pacing makes sense. So let's just say I'm planning on keeping it at regular speed for now, which means you're going to hear me talk quite a bit because there's definitely some footage left here to get through. I'll try to cut out anything you don't need to see so that this video is not insanely long, but I do think there's some benefit to seeing how I do this stuff in terms of the speed that I'm going. So I'm moving on now to do my tight burst around this. I've got my fan pattern adjusted back all the way down, and for starters, I'm doing it with this thing hung up. It would be nice if I had a reasonable way to hang this at a reasonable height. Then I wouldn't have to do much of this screwing around, but I don't really have anything on hand, so here's what I'm doing. I'm starting like this, and I will take this down in a moment when it makes sense to do so and finish this off. I'm not rushing the burst, okay? I'm not John from JN Color on Instagram, so I'm not, just ripping around this thing. I don't really have the setup to do that anyway, and there's nothing wrong with taking your time. It's nice that this lacquer dries extremely quickly. That does make things easier. And the Oxford lacquer comes ready to spray right out of the can, which is also really nice. Unfortunately, I got a phone call there, and because I'm using my phone and a camera app to film this, because it's better than my actual camera, it interrupted my footage. So it basically stopped filming as I was doing the rest of this burst. But yeah, there's not much I can tell you about that. It's an unfortunate turn of events. This is about the speed that I would be doing it at. I'm continuing to kind of make that a little bit more full as I do this. So you can see I'm holding the gun a little further away as I do this because I'm broadening the burst out slightly. If I'm doing the detailed piece on it, I get a little closer. And I squeeze the trigger a little less and I move a little slower. So now I'm moving on to the mahogany red. And I got a note from the owner of this company, an email after I filmed this, but before this video was edited, of course. So now I can tell you, he is and has made the mahogany red deeper. So it's a deeper, kind of more vintage color like you would expect now. This color I'm fond of. It meshes really nicely going over the tobacco brown. It fades in really nicely. It does a good sunburst, but it's not quite the mahogany red that you might expect, and it's not the one that he was going for, the guy who mixes the paint and runs this company. So I'm letting you know now. I hopefully will do a demo with that at some point as well, but for the purpose of this video, I had already sprayed this when I found that out. So I'm just going ahead with it, and I'm happy with how it looks. I'm happy with how it turns out, but it'll be darker if you buy it, unless you ask for it later. You can see how as this goes over the tobacco brown, it changes the hue of it completely. So this is where you need to start making your decisions if you're doing a spray job like this. Do you want to overlap? Do you want to start on the outside and go like this, coating your outside colors with your inside colors as you go? Because you can see it really changes the complexion of that brown, and it stops being such a kind of a tobacco brown and starts to move more into the territory of an auburn type brown. And you can really see the juxtaposition, the difference here between that and the edges, which I haven't gone over with this red yet. I'm going to, though, of course, because I want a cohesive look, and it would look kind of ridiculous if I didn't. So after I do this, I'm going to go in and coat over the edges with the red as well. And then we'll move on to our vintage amber, which you will see I also do kind of a bursting type of thing with. Anyway, for the purpose of this, I'm spraying the edges without adjusting my fan pattern. you can see how the color changes. And the way that I'm doing that is I'm just holding the gun a little further away. You do have to be cautious about this technique. God, that brown looks just fantastic. I'm very happy with that. Anyway, you've got to be cautious about this. If you start holding the gun incredibly far away, then the solvents will evaporate on the way to the piece and the paint won't stick. It'll go on kind of dusty and you won't have the adhesion that you get from those solvents. So do be cautious if you are doing this. I'm well familiar with this product and I know what I can get away with and what kind of volumes I can get away with. But if you're running too much air and you try and do this from like 1.5 feet away, you're not going to have a good result. You're going to regret it. So do be careful about that. Now, I haven't mentioned this because, again, my footage stopped, but you'll see that I have done a burst, not only on the headstock, but also on the neck itself. So I've put that tobacco brown around the outside of both sides of the headstock and around the outside of the neck, which I think looks really cool. And now I'm continuing that burst very carefully with the mahogany red. This is something, on the headstock in particular, this is something that I would recommend you do with an airbrush if you're planning on doing it. It's a small surface, and controlling your patterns with a gun like this takes some practice. It can be difficult, but it's a minigun. It's not too bad, and a little practice will probably get you there. So, very happy with how this is turning out so far. I'm taking the same principle, the same approach on the neck. I've started with that tobacco brown. I'm going to broaden it out slightly with the red, and then I will be going in with the amber to finish it off. And this is about the time where I start to be very thankful that the lacquer dries so quickly, because otherwise I would be out of places to touch on this to hold it in place, and I'd have to kind of spray it as it moves, as it swings there, which I've done before, and it's not great. Just a quick interruption here for a sponsorship message. If you've been watching my channel for a while, you know that I occasionally have videos that are sponsored by Skillshare. Skillshare is an online learning platform that has tutorial videos a lot like YouTube, but with some quality control and some very specific stuff that they specialize in. So not just anybody can make a Skillshare video, and they are generally pretty high quality. In particular, I'm looking at guitar tutorials for myself because I've kind of tried to make a commitment here that I am going to learn how to play the guitar a little bit better so I can do some better demos. And the one that I'm working on right now is right here, Mike Boyd Guitar Fundamentals. Pretty good. I'm going to keep working my way through it. I don't have a lot of time to dedicate to it, but yeah, hopefully I'll be able to play the guitar a little better by the time the next one rolls around. They have tons of stuff on here though. Fine art, video making, business and entrepreneurship, all sorts of stuff that I think a lot of you guys will find useful, including video making for those of you who have gotten into having a YouTube channel or something like that. So we're about to head back into the video, but just before we do, one last thing I'll mention. The first 1,000 people that click the link in the description for Skillshare get a 1-month free membership. So you get 1 month to kind of try this out and see if you like it. Alright, let's get back to the video. So it's time to get to work on our final color here. This is the vintage amber. This is where it all kind of comes together, so to speak. Here I'm even further away, but you can see I'm spraying a little heavier, which you can get away with if you're spraying heavier. If you're not, then being further away, like I said, can cause some problems. And this is going to cause me a lot of overspray. So this is going to come out looking a touch dusty at the end, but that's fine. I know I'm getting the right amount of paint on there. And when it's done drying, I can just go in with a bit of wax and grease remover on a cloth and wipe all of that off. You can see I'm not just using a standard spray technique here. I am still doing the burst. I'm starting on the outside, darkening all of that up first, going over everything that I've gone over before, and then just gently filling in the center because I still want some of this beautiful amber tone in the center, but I want it to deepen up into kind of an orange around the outside, and then the darker orange as it starts to blend in with that mahogany red, and then of course all the way out into this what has become an auburn brown instead of a tobacco brown as I continue to coat it with all of these colors. So that's what we're dealing with. That looks fantastic. I got very excited as I continued to spray this because all of these colors just blend together so nicely. I used to do this, something very similar with spray cans, but it's just much better doing it with the gun like this and using these beautiful Oxford paints. Really happy with how this is looking. And really, you can continue to build these up, and because they're transparent paints like this, they're basically dye-based, you can keep doing this, and keep darkening them as you continue to add paint. And I'm like, people don't seem to understand this very often, but these types of paints, they can only darken because they're dye-based. They can only darken what they're going on to. And really, I mean, ultimately, if you put 300 coats of this onto something, it would basically be black. I know that seems odd because it is a bright yellow color. It's an amber, but it would basically be black. And you can kind of test that theory if you dump a bunch of this into a transparent mixing cup. You can see that it's practically black. If you try and look through it, well, that's what that amount of that paint would look like if you layered it up and let it dry. Weird concept, I know. Anyway, I've now fired this onto the headstock, onto the neck, and it is looking good. So that's about it. You can see there's a little bit of dusty overspray on there, like I said, but that'll wipe right off after. And I'm about done for this one. That is how you paint a burst with lacquers. The same concept applies to a standard sunburst as opposed to this tritone burst, or really whatever you want to do. You will have to be careful if you don't want to layer your paints up, because you'll have to kind of mesh the edge correctly, but in general, this is the application process. So here's what we're left with. I hope you guys enjoyed the video and found it helpful. If you did, please feel free to give it a thumbs up. I would really appreciate it. It helps me out. And don't forget to subscribe so you can see the rest of this series and you can see how this guitar turns out. There's that kind of dusty overspray. If you look really carefully, you can see it, but again, won't be an issue. And that's the product that we're left with. I'm really happy with this. I think these colors look fantastic, and I hope I'm not making anybody dizzy by doing this little bit of filming here. Handheld filming, always a good time. This kit is awesome. The grain's coming through nicely. Really excited to get this thing set up. And comically enough, I'm not sure I've ever actually played a semi-hollow before, so this will be fun. So will the electronics, and by fun I mean horrifying, but oh well, we'll get there. Thanks again for watching, guys. Hope you enjoyed it. Have a good one. See you next time.